Hi my friends! Welcome to the channel English Professionally, and this video course is very special. So it's called Key to All English Grammar. So it'll help you understand how you can learn English grammar really effectively and what you need to start with. Okay? So if you look at this table, so you see that the first column is called Part of Grammar. So you see the most important parts of grammar you need to know and some useful explanations and details in the next columns. Okay, so part of grammar. So first of all, you need to learn English with tenses. And the first group of tenses is simple. You need to know present simple, past simple and future simple. So if you know these simple tense, you'll be able to speak about the present, about the past and about the future. It's what you need for a start. It's your first step. And it's also desirable, you should know some time markers which are typical of this or that tense, like usually, always, a week ago, next week, and so on. And you also need to focus on prepositions, so you need to start with it. Next, so you should look at the second group, so continuous tenses. So you also see that it's present continuous, past continuous, and future continuous. And there are also some time markers which are typical of these tense. So if we look at present continuous, it's now or right now, it's happening at the moment. Right. So next you need to have a look at one more group of tenses, so perfect tenses. It's more complicated. So anyway, so you also need to know that so we see perfect in present, so we have present perfect, past perfect and future perfect. So the main difficulty is that it's very difficult maybe to use these tenses, but there are some time markers so which can help you a lot to understand so when you need to use this group of tenses. So I'm talking about perfect tenses like just, already, ever, never, and so on. Okay, so maybe you'll use only present, past, future, and simple tense. It's okay. It's okay. But anyway, you need to understand, you need to know so other tenses too, because native speakers often use them. So you need to know their structure too. And so the last one, so the last group of tenses is called perfect continuous tense. So present perfect continuous, past perfect continuous, and future perfect continuous. And there are some time markers. So it's usually about duration, so a long action, so we often see it with for. For example, I've been learning English for 3 years and so on. Okay, so maybe you think it's difficult. Anyway, so if you want to speak English fluently and naturally, so you need to learn present, past and future simple first of all. So then you need to pay attention to present continuous, past continuous and present perfect. So there are 6 tenses. So you see these 6 tenses. I've already named them. So you need to use them so in your daily English conversation. So as for the other tenses, so they are more difficult, and I believe you just need to understand so that these tenses exist, and you need to understand so when we use these tenses so that you can understand native speakers when they use more difficult tenses. So is the first important step. Okay, next let's look at passive voice. If we look at passive voice, so it's also a problem for many students. So the thing is that we often meet passive voice, so in different correspondence, we often hear it, so in the news, and you need to start with, so passive voice in present simple, so in past simple, in future simple, then you need to have a look at present perfect passive and present continuous passive. Yeah, so present continuous passive. So you may think, yeah, you may think that so there is one more group, yeah, of passive voice, but it isn't so. It just actually I had it here by mistake. I just need to pay attention to the fact that so if we look at the formation of passive voice, so in present perfect, past perfect, or future perfect, it's more complicated. So you need to have more concentration anyway. So yeah, more practice and concentration. And you may think that maybe you don't need passive voice. Anyway, it's quite often in speaking, especially among advanced students. For example, I can just say, as it has already been said. So, as it has already been said, and it's present perfect, so this phrase is quite natural. Okay, you also need to know modal verbs. Modal verbs, I mean that not only can, must, should, could, yeah. For example, you can say, I can learn English, I can understand you, I must improve my English, I should speak English without mistakes, so I could find more free time for English, and so on. So that there are other modal verbs, but you need to start with these modal verbs, and you also need to be able to say something in the past using these modal verbs. For example, you should have done it yesterday. So you need a perfect infinitive after should and some other modal verbs. You also need to know it. So yeah, so you need to know it. So if you don't need to know, really, it's so easy. It's so easy to make a mistake. Alright, so there are other very important parts of English grammar which can't be ignored. So I'm talking about adjectives. Right. So if we look at adjectives, yeah, it's about vocab, or it's about our vocab, or it's about our vocabulary, but there are structures. There are such structures as there are such forms as comparative forms and superlative. So comparative is like better, and superlative is the best. For example, I need to know English better, and so I hope it will be the best project. So it's called superlative. Superlative. So you need to understand these rules. So when we say, for example, longer, and when we say not with er, but with more interesting. For example, not just the biggest, but more beautiful. So you need to understand and to know the formation of different adjectives. And more complicated structures, like as, and the. For example, the more practice, the better. So, to sum up, yeah, I'll try to be short. So you need to start with tenses, and you need to understand all these tenses, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll use, all of them in your speech. Of course not. But if you really want to understand other people, you need to know it. So, actually, we have the same story with passive voice, modal verbs, and adjectives. So, if you really want to improve your level and have a more advanced level, so you need to know lots of English structures. So, not only for beginners, but for pre-intermediate students, intermediate, upper intermediate, and advanced students. So, you need to start with some simple structures, like there is, there are. Then you need to have a look at more difficult ones, like used to do, to be used to doing something, manage to do something. It's like be able to do, had better, would rather, and so many other structures. Okay, so, or many others. So students often ask me, so how many English structures should we know? And so If you remember that we have a video, it's called 150, so English structure, so really it's a lot if you are serious about learning English. If you don't want to be a beginner or a pre-intermediate student or an intermediate student, if you really want to be an advanced student, you need to know, I believe, about 200 English grammar structures. It's a lot. So you need to understand that English grammar isn't only about tenses, isn't only about passive voice, modal verbs, not only this. There are really lots of English grammar structures you need to know, and you see just some examples of it. You should also pay attention to prepositions, and how can we understand this topic, this part of grammar. First of all, you need to know some general prepositions and their meanings, like in, so it means inside, on, like on the surface, some prepositional phrases, for example, at home, so on a business trip. You also need to know prepositional phrases with adjectives. It's like interested in, so afraid of, with verbs like react to, happen to, differ from, with nouns like reason for. So not only this, not only the first meaning. Okay, so the problem is that most students know, okay, so in, so for example, it's in the box, on, so it's on my desk, but it isn't enough. It isn't enough. You need to know prepositional phrases, like, for example, he's on duty, so he's on a business trip, he's on holiday, and you should also pay attention to different lists of prepositions with adjectives, verbs, and nouns. It's also very important. It isn't only one word, it's much more. I believe it's more than 100 English words, so with different prepositions. Yeah, the next problem might be conditionals. No problem. I'm not talking about zero conditional, it's pretty easy, but you should know the first conditional, the second conditional, the third conditional, and so mixed conditional. It's more difficult, but it's also useful, mixed conditional. Okay, I think that now you can see it better, so it's written mixed here. All right, so and last but not least, so phrasal verbs. It's phrasal verbs. Well, so you need to know some basic phrasal verbs, maybe 10 phrasal verbs, 20 phrasal verbs, like go on, give up, so I'll go on learning English with you, give up, like he gave up smoking, but it isn't enough. So if you really want to master your English, you need to know different prepositions, so different phrasal verbs with up. For example, give up, take up, with down, go down, fall down, and so on. And of course, you should also know some spoken phrases with phrasal verbs, like I'd like to point out that. So I'd like to point out means I'd like to say that, or I can't work out, it means I can't understand. So you need to make your speech more natural. Yeah, make it sound more natural. Okay, so my friends, so to sum up, or all in all, in conclusion, so all things considered, so I want to tell you that really we can call this table key to all English grammar. So it's like a map of your English studies. So what you need to start with and what you need to finish with. Okay, my friends, you see that English grammar isn't only about tenses. You can't ignore it, and you also need to understand that there are some English tenses which you use quite often, so in your English speaking practice. So we named these tenses, you see, so it's present, past, future simple, present continuous, past continuous, and present perfect. If you look at the other tenses, you need to know how to form these tenses. If you don't know it, so it will be very problematic, to understand native speakers and other people who will use all these things in their speech. Well, so you also need to know more advanced grammar. I'm talking about passive voice and modal verbs, but not only in the present, but in the past as well. So if you look at adjectives, you need to know comparative and superlative forms. And so English grammar is also about English structures. You need to know lots of English structures. Really, it's the best way, to proficiency, to fluency, and it will help you a lot. Not 5, not 10, much more. I believe it's around 150, around 200. And also focus on prepositions, not just their basic meaning, but lists. Adjectives with prepositions, verbs with prepositions, nouns with prepositions, as you see here, and conditionals and phrasal verbs. Okay, my friends, so I think that you also have something to tell us. So actually, we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you. Tense. So if we look at present continuous, it's now or right now. It's happening at the moment. Right. So next you need to have a look at one more group of tenses, so perfect tenses. Yeah, it's more complicated. So anyway, so you also need to know that, so we see perfect in present, so we have present perfect, important parts of grammar you need to know, and some useful explanations and details, yeah, in the next columns. Okay, so part of grammar. So first of all, you need to learn English with tenses, yeah, and the first group of tenses is simple. You need to know present simple, past simple, and future simple. So if you know these simple tense, you'll be able to speak, yeah, about the present, about the past, and about the future. It's what you need for a start. It's your first step. And it's also desirable, yeah, you should know some time markers which are typical of this or that tense. Hi my friends, welcome to the channel English Professionally, and this video course is very special. So it's called Key to All English Grammar. So it'll help you understand how you can learn English grammar really effectively and what you need to start with. Okay, so if you look at this table, so you see that the first column is called part of grammar. So you see the most like usually, always, a week ago, next week, and so on. And you also need to focus on prepositions, so you need to start with it. Next, so you should look at the second group, so continuous tenses. So you also see that it's present continuous, past continuous, and future continuous. And there are also some time markers which are typical of these